talked some about the history and politics of how the Bible was compiled. And then, last session, we talked about contradictions and inconsistencies in the Bible. I think the reason those topics can get a little bit uncomfortable is that if there are a lot of people involved in making the Bible with their normal, everyday human kinds of concerns and power dynamics, and especially if the Bible is not internally consistent all the time, that might mean that the Bible gets some things wrong. And if the Bible gets things wrong, then maybe God gets things wrong. What do we do with that? So I want to tackle that question head on today. I always tell my university students that they should be sure to get a B or lower in at least one class their first semester. That way they can stop worrying about having a perfect GPA and just enjoy the process of learning. So I'm going to do us a similar favor right now by saying right off the bat, the Bible does get some things wrong. So we can stop worrying about trying to prove it right all the time and just enjoy it. So here we go. You ready? In Genesis, the earth was created before the sun. Of course, we now know that the earth is made of the dust from the formation of the sun. And what about that earth? In the Bible, it's a flat surface that rests on pillars. It's not clear what the pillars themselves are supposed to rest on. So the Bible's cosmology is outdated. It also gets some basic biological facts wrong. For example, in Proverbs, we're encouraged to be industrious like ants who gather food in the summer to prepare for winter, quote, without having any chief or officer or ruler. But biologists now know that ant colonies operate with a rather complex social hierarchy. The Bible even miscalculates the value of pi. But it's not just cosmology and geometry and the social behavior of ants. The Bible gets some things wrong morally. Listen to these instructions given to the Israelites as they move through the nations and villages of Canaan. When you draw near to a town to fight against it, offer it terms of peace. If it accepts your terms of peace and surrenders to you, then all the people in the town shall serve you at forced labor. If it does not submit to you peacefully, but makes war against you, then you shall besiege it. And when the Lord your God gives it into your hands, you shall put all its males to the sword. You may, however, take as your booty the women, the children, the livestock, and everything else in the town as your spoil. You may enjoy the spoil of your enemies, which the Lord your God has given you. Thus you shall treat all the towns that are very far from you, which are not towns of the nations here. But as for the towns of these people, that the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, you must not let anything that breathes remain alive. You shall annihilate them. The Hittites and the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, just as the Lord your God commanded you. Then there are commands about the treatment of slaves, like when a slave owner strikes a slave with a rod and the slave dies immediately, the owner should be punished. But if the slave survives a day or two, there's no punishment, for the slave is the owner's property. The subjugation of women is also egregious in the Bible. In a single chapter in Deuteronomy, we read that if a man marries a woman and later decides he doesn't like her, he can drop her off at her father's doorstep claiming that he finds, quote, no evidence of her virginity. The woman's father is then obliged to produce such evidence, however you might do that. Or the men of the town will stone her to death on her father's front lawn. And if a man rapes an engaged woman in the middle of the city, the men of the town should stone her, the victim, to death as well, since obviously she didn't cry loudly enough for help. If she's raped in the country, that's not held against her. But suppose that the victim is not already spoken for, and she does cry for help loudly enough that the rapist is caught in the act. Then she's forced to marry her assailant. At this point, many Christians are tempted to protest, well, that's all from the backward, outdated Old Testament. But the situation's not any better in the New Testament, where slaves are instructed not to talk back, but to be completely and perfectly submissive to their masters. Quote, from the heart, and quote, with enthusiasm, but nevertheless with, quote, fear and trembling, especially if their masters are Christians, so that, quote, they may be an ornament to the doctrine of God our Savior. And women in the New Testament are instructed to be subject to their husbands, because while he is the image and reflection of God, she is the reflection of her man, created for his sake. That's a problem. The Bible doesn't just get things scientifically wrong, it gets things morally wrong. So what are we supposed to do? Next time, we're going to talk about whether there's any sense then in which the Bible can be seen as a reliable guide for life and faith. So if you're feeling uncomfortable at this point, know that that's where we're going. But I think that it's important that we really feel the weight of the problem, the Bible's irreducible humanness.